So my name is Stephen Lutz. I'm the Blue Carbon Lead at GRID-Arendal. We are a Norwegian foundation and collaborating center with the United Nations Environment Programme. For us, the importance of Africa and the Our Ocean Conference is the ability for Africa to demonstrate its leadership on global ocean issues. And this is really embedded with one of the topics that we work on, blue carbon, how mangroves store and sequester carbon, and how these coastal ecosystems can play a role in the solution to climate change. Okay, and what we've done to illustrate Africa's leadership is last week we had a delegation from the Indonesian Ministry of Marine Affairs and Fisheries, and they came over and spent a week-long trip here in Kenya. It was a technical exchange between the governments of Indonesia and Kenya, and it was supported by the government of Norway. And what we did is we explored, by visiting government offices and communities, we explored blue carbon around the lens of governance, finances, technical matters, and communities and benefit sharing. Okay, so we met with the Kenyan Marine Fisheries Research Institute, or KEMFRI, Kenyan Forestry Service, with the Ministry of Blue Economy, Ministry of Environment and Blue Economy, and with NEMA. And we looked at a couple aspects. One of them, which I think illustrates how Kenya is a global leader in the field of blue carbon, is how Kenya has successfully piloted and introduced blue carbon into the voluntary carbon market. So there's two projects down the coast, one called Mikoko Pamoja, one called the Vanga Blue Forests. These projects have been successfully operating in the voluntary carbon market for over 6 and over 10 years. Okay, so there's a history of successful projects. These are community-based projects, and we regard them as high integrity blue carbon because they're so positive to the community. The communities from these projects receive a minimum of 60% of the revenue from the trading of carbon offsets. And this comes from their mangrove conservation and restoration activities. Okay? In any case, during that week, the officials from the ministry visited with the government offices, and then we went down the coast close to Tanzania. We stayed in Gazi Bay for a couple of nights, and we visited with the communities in Vanga and in Gazi Bay. Okay, so it was a full range of governance exchange from the top to the bottom and from the bottom to the top. Okay, now I think the Kenyans, I mean the Indonesians really learned on the importance of putting communities first in these blue carbon projects. Okay, if you want to have it successful, there's a number of things you need to do. One of the most important is make sure that the communities are on board and that they get a piece of the action, so to speak. And then during our Oceans Conference on Monday, we brought down a more senior delegation, a director from the Ministry of Marine Affairs and Fisheries in Indonesia, and a representative from the Norwegian government, and we had a breakfast session in Gazi. So we then further reinforced the discussion, and this discussion was specifically from those participants with the project lead and the community down in Gazi Bay, talking about how these projects are set up, run, the impacts, the lessons learned, etc. And when we were in Vanga, and I've talked about how the communities are so important. Well, one mechanism for engaging with the community is essentially the transparency of finances. So that's one of the key questions. Who gets what? Can we see who gets what? Okay. And when you share that information with the communities, then they're a lot happier to come on board with these types of projects. So through another Norwegian-funded project, my colleague Rob Barnes has been working with the Vanga Bay community and partners like the Kenyan Marine Fisheries Research Institute. And they put together a mural on the finances, on giving clear and transparent information to the community on what happens to those finances. When the Indonesians were visiting with Vanga, they got to participate and paint that mural as well, which is a great take-home experience for the Indonesians. What this means is that the Vanga Blue Forest Project is now the world's first blue carbon project on the international market that has full transparency of finances. Okay, And what that means is that the credits that they sell are unlike any other credits on the voluntary carbon market, because they can verify by metrics that these finances are going towards the community. They can freely inform community members, and they can show that to the international community. This is a world's first. Indonesia is the country in the world with the world's largest mangrove forests and seagrass ecosystems. They have the largest blue carbon ecosystems on the planet, yes. So they stand a lot to gain by doing this successfully as a potential financial mechanism to support the sustainable management of these ecosystems, and of course to support communities that live and use these ecosystems, live around and use these ecosystems. And the second thing I think I'll say is that, you know, when we started the trip, we had the lead from the delegation. You know, I sort of facilitated the conversation and led this sort of conversation at the very beginning. But through the trip, it was really great to see how the Indonesians were then enhancing their capacity and understanding and ability to ask those key questions. So they didn't need my help at the end. And I thought that was a really good progression to illustrate increased capacity and understanding in these issues. And I thought that was really fantastic. So I think they've taken home some really key messages on the impacts and the lessons learned from these projects. I think, at least in my space of blue carbon, and Kenya also released its NDC blue carbon investment strategy. I think, you know, Kenya has illustrated global leadership in the field of blue carbon, and I think many countries should look at this, look at their legislation, look at their strategies, and can learn from this. Many countries want to engage in this space, but for such a long time, and as we previously discussed, nature-based offsetting in the voluntary carbon market has not done too well because of integrity challenges. So Kenya is illustrating how you can overcome these integrity challenges. And these lessons from Kenya and from Africa mean that the whole world can potentially benefit from this financial mechanism if it's done right.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
We say asante sana.
Asante sana. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.